Okay, here's a great story for you guys. I like to do a lot of story times for those of you who are new here. Story time is always a lot of fun, and it usually involves copious amounts of illegal substances, which we refer to in this page as sandwiches. If anyone was confused before about sandwiches, we're talking...
Tonight will be no different.
Yeah. Yeah, tonight will be no different, exactly. So...
I just assumed that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. So, okay, guys, at the end of high school, I lived in a town just outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And if you don't know geographically where that is, it's pretty much right above Albany, New York, if you know where that is. Anyways, so I was living there, and then just after high school, me and a bunch of friends decided it would be fun to pile into my buddy's van. It was me and 3 guys. Piled into a van and drove all the way from Toronto to Vancouver, British Columbia, which is a long drive. If you try and push it and just drive straight, you're still looking at like 4.5 days. But we bought, let's see, there were 4 of us in the car. Yeah, that's right. We bought 5 ounces of sandwiches before we left on the trip. And we expected that was going to make it was going to last all the way to British Columbia. Yeah, those those 5 ounces of sandwiches were gone in 3 days between the 4 of us. We went overboard. We had like a big bong going in the front seat and other devices all throughout the car, and I had like a coffee grinder for the for the sandwiches running off an electrical outlet we installed in the car and all kinds of cool stuff. We were set for a trip, man.
Filthy spawns from the British Isles, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nuz.
But it was awesome. It was so much fun, and started off great this whole trip. So we got out to Lethbridge, Alberta, where I'm originally from, and we just barely made it there on what was like the crumbs in the bottom of the sandwich bag, right? And so we got to Lethbridge. We picked up some more sandwiches from a friend of mine, and we moved on into British Columbia, and then we started slowing down the trip and taking our time, seeing places all over the place. And a little background for this, so I didn't really have a whole lot of money to bring on this trip, but I was budgeting it out and figured out just how far I could make it, you know. And I was figuring at the end of this trip to stay in Alberta on our way back. So what happened was, oh, I didn't know that, whoosh. So what happened was, and you know, and there was one other guy there was a guy named Ryan on the trip with us too, Ryan Baker, and he didn't have a lot of money either, but the other 2 guys, Ransley and Eric, or Beatson, they had all kinds of cash, and they were kind of just running the show. Like, literally, when we'd stop for groceries at night, it'd be like, if I didn't have money to toss into some groceries that night, I wasn't allowed to have any say in, like, what we bought. It was just kind of those 2 just kind of decided what we were eating that night and everything, and it was getting really annoying and frustrating, but I was willing to live with it. And so we get into British Columbia and we start driving around seeing these beautiful mountain ranges and stuff, and it's just gorgeous. We got to, I have a lot of family in British Columbia. We got to my one uncle's place, and he grows his own sandwiches or ingredients for sandwiches. We show up at his place, and we were only going to spend one night. We ended up spending 3 whole days sitting in his garage eating sandwiches with this guy. He's so fucking cool. And this was the first time in my life that I had the opportunity to eat sandwiches with any of my family members other than my brother, so that was really nice. So things were still going okay there. You know, my uncle was kind of taking care of the food and stuff for us. We just threw him a bit of cash here and there. And then we moved on. And when we moved on, things started getting really stressful between us because, like, it was obvious that those with money had the say. Those without money were just going to have to deal with it. And they were being really cool about sharing the sandwiches with Ryan, but for some reason, they weren't very cool about sharing with me. Like, Eric would have a bong going in the front seat, and I'd be like, "Hey man, can I get a hit of that sandwich?" And I'd be like, "No." And then he'd just smoke it. And I'd be like, "Okay." And then he'd pass it around to everybody, but make sure it didn't come to me. I'm like, "What the hell, man? Like, what did I do to you, right?" So I just kind of let it slide and just whatever, you know. He'll realize he's being a dick sometime. You know, I was just expecting the best of him, I guess. And then, so we got all the way out to Vancouver Island. We went through Vancouver, the city, took a ferry with the car, and went across to Vancouver Island. And and we were having some fun out there. Oh, a little side story to that. We stayed at Ransley's uncle's place in a town called Nanaimo, well, outside of Nanaimo, and his uncle also grows his own ingredients for sandwiches. And these sandwiches were like 8.5 feet tall, each plant. They were crazy.
That's a big sandwich.
Oh yeah, each sandwich on the plant was like the size of my head, dude. It was crazy.
Like, Mr. Sub boasts the 6-foot sandwich.
But I mean,
Footers.
on Vancouver Island, it's actually a rainforest, so everything there just grows at ridiculous rates. And this guy had some real primo sandwiches growing out there, and we showed up there again with like nothing to smoke, eh? Yeah, I know, right? We showed up with nothing to smoke, so he came up to where we were staying in his attic at the end of the night, and he handed us this little white film case, and he said, "Go nuts." He said, "I brought this shit back from Jamaica. You guys go nuts. Try and..." He said, "I dare you. Try and, eat as much of that sandwich as you can." And it was this like, I guess you could call it oil, but it was like a light brown oil. And we took I think it was probably butter, now that I think about it, if you know what butter is. But we took a tiny little hoot of that each on some hot knives, and I swear to God, after all those sandwiches that I've described to you guys, we ate all the way across the country, we each had just one hit of this sandwich, and we all passed out. The blades were still going, like the torch was still on. We were out cold. And that was the most incredible bite of a sandwich I've ever had. And so, what's it called? So then the next day, we took off for a town called Tofino, and we're hanging out at a campsite there, and things are just so strained between us. I just couldn't believe how rude Eric was being, and like he was the only person left really with money at this point, and money for sandwiches anyways. And he was really taking charge of who gets a bite of sandwiches and who doesn't. It was really getting rude. So he what's it called? We're sitting around the campfire at night, and he decided he wanted to play Sandwich Monopoly, where like they were making up rules where every time such and such happens, every time you miss this, every time you go to jail, you got to take a bite of a sandwich kind of thing. And he purposely invited the other two and did not invite me. And I sat by the fire listening to them have a hell of a time, tons of fun, while they're sitting in the tent just eating these sandwiches, playing their game. I just sat there listening and was really, really hurt by the whole thing. So then the morning comes. And in the morning, Eric only had about 5 little hits of sandwich left. And he took those hits of sandwich and he ate them all himself. And on his very last one, as he's hitting it, I said to him, "I bet that's pretty good, isn't it?" And he exhaled it right in my face and goes, "Yeah, man." And just, real dick-like. And I said, "All right, that's it. What is your fucking problem?" And I started laying into him, like, why you gotta be such a dick, man? Why you gotta fucking hold out on me? Like, am I not cool enough for you? Am I not fucking part of your little group here? Like, should I not have come on this goddamn trip? And I just kind of freaked out and yelled and screamed at them. I grabbed all my shit out of the van and I took off walking. And I got to a bus station. I called up my grandparents who live in British Columbia, and they paid for me to take a bus to their place, and I spent the rest of the summer picking apples in the Okanagan Valley, which turned out great for me. I ended up experimenting with some really cool substances and stuff, and had a great summer. But I'll just never forget what a bunch of douches those guys were. I mean, Ryan was the only other person on that trip who seemed to have a heart. But like I was saying earlier, apparently Eric Beetson, at the end of that trip, after I yelled at him and everything, apparently he stayed in Vancouver, and the other two drove back on their own. When he stayed in Vancouver, I heard that he had really taken to heart what I had said, and thought about it, and apparently changed for the better. Somebody was telling me a couple years later at a party that they'd met up with him, and he shared with them that he was really impacted by my eloquent speech, because I'll tell you, when I lay into somebody, I'm eloquent. Very eloquent. I told him exactly how it is. This game sucks, eh? Alright, well, see you later. Yeah, so that's my story. I'll tell you guys the story of what happened when I got to British Columbia the next time. That's a good one.